Over 3 decades of analyzing the cutting edge of global military hardware has taught me one chilling, inescapable truth. The most devastating losses in national defense are rarely suffered on the front lines. The most catastrophic failures occur long before a single shot is fired, in the quiet realization that $1 trillion investment has been rendered obsolete before it even entered the theater of war. Right now, we are witnessing the collapse of the single most expensive project in the history of human civilization. The United States has poured an inconceivable $1.7 trillion into the F-35 Joint Strike Fighter program. This is not a figure measured in the hundreds of billions. It is a $1.7 trillion gamble that has spanned 30 years, 3 distinct service variants, and the tactical futures of 12 allied nations. This entire gargantuan effort was built upon a single, unshakable pillar of faith: the assumption of stealth. The F-35 was never intended to be the fastest interceptor in the sky, nor was it designed to outmaneuver the world's most agile dogfighters. It does not carry the heaviest payload, nor does it possess the longest operational range. Every cent of that $1.7 trillion was justified by one specific capability: the promise that this aircraft could penetrate the world's most sophisticated air defenses without ever being seen. Stealth is not just a feature added to the F-35. It is the entire strategic rationale for its development and its astronomical cost. If you remove the invisibility, the F-35 becomes an overpriced relic. And tonight, according to a logistical operation tracked by American satellite intelligence with a sense of escalating panic, that invisibility has officially vanished. Over 72 hours of continuous, high-capacity transport flights from the Russian Federation to the heart of Iran, a system designed to make the very concept of stealth irrelevant, has been deployed. The S-700, Russia's pinnacle air defense architecture, has arrived. It is the successor to the S-400 that NATO members were forbidden from buying, and the evolution of the S-500 that Russia activated in 2021. It is now positioned across 3 strategic hubs in western and central Iran, forming a radar geometry that Western intelligence has been frantically analyzing for the last 6 hours. The verdict is definitive. Every F-35 flying within the S-700's reach is now visible on radar. This isn't a theoretical possibility or a conditional vulnerability. It is a hard reality. The stealth technology that cost $1.7 trillion to refine has been bypassed by a radar framework using physical principles that Western engineers have known for years, whose development was watched by intelligence agencies for decades, and whose final deployment was seen 72 hours ago. Yet the reaction from the American establishment has been the same institutional stagnation and paralysis that has haunted every major turning point in this era of conflict. Tonight, we are going to peel back the layers of this technological disaster. I will show you exactly what the S-700 is and how it exploits the fundamental laws of physics to defeat the stealth designs that American scientists spent a generation perfecting. We must confront what a $1.7 trillion investment actually means when the core assumption it rests upon is proven false in a real-world operational environment. I want to explore 4 critical questions that are being ignored by the mainstream defense media. Questions that require a level of brutal honesty that the current moment demands. First, we have to look at the S-700 itself. How does it manage to see the invisible? What does its specific radar architecture reveal about the Russian engineering philosophy, which has been quietly solving the problem of stealth through physics that American designers simply failed to mitigate? Second, we need to understand the operational death spiral. We will walk through every single mission the F-35 was built for: strike, suppression of air defenses, intelligence gathering, and air superiority. And I will explain exactly how those missions fall apart when the plane is tracked and targeted from the moment it crosses the horizon. Third, we must assess the financial and industrial fallout. What happens to a $1.7 trillion program when its primary selling point is a lie? We are looking at a procurement earthquake that will shatter the American defense budget, destabilize 12 allied nations, and rock the very foundations of the industrial base that has centered its entire future on F-35 production. Finally, we have to look at the new world order. What does a Middle East and a broader global landscape look like when Russian defensive technology has checkmated American stealth? We are entering a period where the strategic balance between the West and a new, crystallized adversary coalition has shifted permanently. Which doctrines and alliance commitments are now obsolete? Stay with me because we are describing a historical watershed moment that dwarfs every other battlefield event in this series of conflicts. If you are here for the kind of deep dive analysis that treats a $1.7 trillion failure with the gravity it deserves, then I encourage you to support this channel. Subscribe now, hit the like button, and share this with anyone who needs to understand why a single radar deployment just rewrote the rules of modern aerial warfare. I read every comment, so let me know your assessment of this shift. Now, let's look at the S-700. To truly grasp the scale of this crisis, we have to understand that the S-700 doesn't just represent a better radar, it represents a different understanding of physics. Understanding this is the only way to realize why this deployment is a technological point of no return. The stealth technology inside the F-35 is designed to exploit a very specific physical principle related to the radar cross-section of an object. This cross-section is the area of a target that reflects energy back to the source. A large cross-section is easy to see. A small one is supposed to be lost in the background noise of the radar receiver. American engineers achieve this through two methods. The first is shaping. Every angle and edge of the F-35 is precisely calculated to bounce radar waves away from the sender rather than back to it. By eliminating 90-degree angles and flat surfaces, the aircraft scatters incoming energy into the void. The second method is radar absorbent material, or RAM. These are high-tech coatings and composites that drink in radar energy, converting it into heat instead of reflecting it. However, here is the fatal flaw. Both of these methods are tuned to a very specific part of the spectrum. They are optimized to defeat centimetric wavelength radars, the X-band and Ku-band systems used by standard surface-to-air missiles. This was a deliberate choice because these are the frequencies used to actually guide a missile to its target in the final seconds of an engagement. The S-700 does not try to outcalculate the F-35 in those bands. Instead, it operates in the metric wavelength bands, VHF and UHF. In these frequencies, the very physics of stealth change. Stealth shaping only works when the geometric features of the plane are small compared to the radar's wavelength. When you use metric wavelengths, the radar waves are roughly the same size as the wings, the tail, or the fuselage of the F-35. At this point, the waves don't bounce off or get absorbed. They create a phenomenon called resonance. The entire body of the aircraft begins to act like an antenna, broadcasting a return signal that cannot be hidden by any shape or coating. American engineers have known this was a weakness since the birth of the stealth program in the late 1970s. The traditional defense against this was that while VHF radar could see a stealth plane, it couldn't see it clearly enough to actually shoot it down. It was like seeing a blurry shape in the fog. You know something is there, but you can't hit it with a sniper rifle. The S-700 has solved that resolution problem through a process called data fusion. Its architecture is not just one radar, it is a massive integrated brain. It takes the detection data from the metric VHF radars and combines it with a network of passive sensors, infrared tracking systems, and electronic intelligence receivers. It uses artificial intelligence to fuse these different data points into a single high-resolution track. By the time the data reaches the interceptor missile, it is no longer a blurry shape. It is a locked target. The S-700 doesn't try to punch through the stealth. It simply walks around it. It uses physics that the F-35 was never designed to counter. This brings us to the devastating operational reality. When an aircraft that relies on being a ghost is suddenly visible, it doesn't just lose an advantage, it becomes a liability. The loss of stealth is a cascade failure that invalidates every single mission the F-35 was meant to perform. Consider the mission of suppressing enemy air defenses, or SEAD. In American doctrine, the F-35 is the door kicker. It is supposed to sneak into enemy territory, find the radar sites, and destroy them so that other planes can follow. But against an S-700, the F-35 is the one being hunted. It is detected hundreds of miles before it can even get close to its target. The plane meant to destroy the air defense system is shot down by the very system it was sent to kill. If the SEAD mission fails, the entire air campaign fails. Without the ability to suppress the S-700, no other aircraft, no tankers, no transports, no older fighters can survive in that airspace. Then there are strike operations. The F-35 was bought by dozens of countries to be their primary deep strike platform, replacing older jets because it could supposedly reach high-value targets without a massive escort of support planes. But the S-700 can detect the F-35 at a range of roughly 600 kilometers using its VHF array. This gives the defenders a massive window of warning. The S-700's interceptors have a reach of 400 kilometers. This means the F-35 is being engaged and destroyed 200 kilometers before it even reaches the point where it can release its weapons. The deep strike capability, which was the primary justification for Allied nations to spend billions on this jet, is now effectively non-existent against modern Russian systems. The same logic applies to reconnaissance. The F-35 has an incredible suite of sensors designed to gather intelligence, but those sensors only work if the plane can get close to the target. If the plane is visible, it is a target, not a spy. Even the role of air superiority is compromised. While the F-22 is the primary dogfighter, the F-35 was supposed to provide the numbers to hold the sky. But ground-based systems like the S-700 that can kill a plane from 400 kilometers away make traditional air-to-air combat irrelevant. Within the coverage of an S-700, the F-35 is nothing more than a $1.7 trillion target that cannot do its job. This brings us to the financial and institutional catastrophe. This is no longer just a military problem. It is a crisis of the state. The $1.7 trillion cost of the F-35 program includes about $400 billion that is already being spent on R&D and initial jets. That money is gone. But there is another $1.3 trillion in projected future spending for maintenance, upgrades, and keeping the production lines running for decades. This $1.3 trillion was authorized based on the promise that this plane would be the king of the skies for the next 50 years. Now that the core technology has been bypassed, the American government is facing a choice that is almost impossible to navigate. They could continue the program and spend that $1.3 trillion on a plane they know is vulnerable, arguing that its other features are worth the price. They could try to pivot, cutting the F-35 and rushing a new sixth-generation jet. But that would mean admitting to the taxpayers and the world that the last 30 years were a mistake. This would cause a political and industrial disaster that the defense world is not prepared to handle. Or they could do what they usually do, maintain the fiction. They could keep insisting that the F-35 is invisible, avoid any public tests against systems like the S-700, and let the program continue on sheer momentum and political inertia. History suggests that this third path, institutional denial, is the most likely. It is also the most dangerous. If you build your entire military strategy on a capability that no longer works, you are inviting a disaster. Pilots will be sent on missions based on survival assumptions that are 20 years out of date. They will be told they are invisible until the moment a missile hits them. This gap between the official capability and the actual reality won't just appear in budget meetings. It will appear in the form of burning wreckage on the battlefield. This crisis extends far beyond Washington. There are 12 other nations, including the UK, Japan, Israel, and Australia, that have tied their national security to the F-35. They bought this plane because the US assured them it was a generational leap in technology. Now, every one of those governments is quietly running the same math. They are wondering if the American promises were ever true, and if they should continue spending their national budgets on an aircraft that can be seen by their adversaries. We will likely see a slow-motion retreat. Orders will be reduced, deliveries will be delayed, and these nations will suddenly start pouring money into their own domestic fighter programs. The trust that holds these alliances together is built on the idea of American technological dominance. When that dominance is shown to be a mirage, the alliances themselves begin to fray. And we cannot ignore the industrial impact. Lockheed Martin's F-35 production is the most complex manufacturing web ever created, with suppliers in 45 different states. It was designed to be too big to fail. By spreading the jobs across so many congressional districts, they made it politically impossible to cancel. But even that political shield has its limits. When the operational reality of the S-700 becomes impossible to ignore, the political cover will eventually evaporate. We must also look at the global strategic shift. For 20 years, Russia has been obsessed with defeating American stealth. With the S-700 deployment to Iran, they haven't just protected an ally. They have sent a signal to every nation on the planet. They have demonstrated that the physics-based approach to air defense works. This has massive implications for the Pacific. China has been following the exact same path. Their own VHF radar systems, like the JY-27A, are built on the same principles as the S-700. The success of the Russian system in Iran validates everything China has been doing to prepare for a conflict over Taiwan. For years, the U.S. has assumed that F-35s could penetrate Chinese defenses. That assumption is now in tatters. If China can see the F-35 just as clearly as the S-700 can, the entire cost-benefit analysis of a Pacific conflict changes overnight. In Tokyo and Seoul, the realization is already setting in. They are looking at their fleets of F-35s and realizing they are facing adversaries, China and North Korea, who use the same Russian-style radar physics. This is why we are seeing Japan and South Korea suddenly accelerate their own independent fighter programs. They are no longer willing to bet their survival on American procurement promises. The ultimate lesson here is the danger of a single point of failure strategy. The West spent $1.7 trillion on the assumption that stealth would always be an I win button. They ignored 30 years of warnings that the physics of the problem were being solved by the other side. They built a strategic edifice on a single technological pillar, and tonight, that pillar has been kicked out from under them. The S-700 didn't have to be more advanced than American tech. It just had to be different. It routed around the problem rather than trying to punch through it. This is the most expensive lesson in the history of warfare. As we look forward, we have to ask, what is the next trillion-dollar program being built on a single assumption? What other invisible assets are actually standing in the spotlight? We are watching the end of an era. The age of unchallenged stealth is over, and the $1.7 trillion bill has just come due. This isn't just about a plane or a radar. It's about the failure of an institutional mindset that refused to look at the physics until it was too late. Tell me what you think in the comments. Is the F-35 program still viable, or is it a sunk cost we can no longer afford? If this analysis gave you the clarity you won't find in the mainstream news, like the video and share it. Subscribe to stay informed on the strategic realities that define our world. I will see you in the next one.